Hello everybody and welcome to episode 3 of the Rotation and Balancing Attacks. Before we go into the episode, I want to say a gigantic thank you to all of you that have tuned in. The response has been overwhelming and a ton of people have emailed me, tweeted me, Facebooked me, so many ideas for future episodes. I plan on getting to them, but I just want to take a second to thank you for the unbelievable support you've shown me for these episodes. The problem we're tackling this week is multitasking attacks while macroing. Attacks can look sexy, but to advance yourself as a player, it's a necessity to micromanage your units while maintaining your macro and development of your base. A ton of people just say get faster, get quicker, increase your APM, but that's really not conducive to a learning environment. We're here to be a bit more comprehensive than that so that you can execute at pro level play. First, let's start off with introducing the rotation. The rotation is something I've labeled to turn you into a well-oiled machine. I'm not talking about this type of well-oiled machine. I'm talking about someone that is able to execute their macro in a cycle in order to reduce the amount of items you forget. Let's start out with the basics of listing what we want to do. We will check and make harvesters, check chrono boosts, injects, mules, and use them accordingly. Check and build supply depots, overlords, or pylons. Check and produce units from our production structures. And lastly, check for excess money. And from that, if there's no excess money, we repeat. If there exists money, then allocate that to the appropriate place. Let's take a look at an example now. We'll start off very slow. We get our SCVs, check for mules, we place them if possible. Then our supply depots, of course. Then we go to units, marines, siege tanks, medevacs, etc. We make all those, check to see if we have excess. We do not, so we continue it again. And you're going to be really fast. The rotation can be a couple of seconds. And you can see that you're able to just check on everything really quickly once you get good hotkeys and mechanics. This is the power of the rotation. We use the rotation all the time, but you also need to understand the costs of the rotation. When you do the rotation, focus on where your eyes and your screen is located. If you have bad hotkeys or really bad mechanics, you might have to focus on the screen, select all your production buildings, and then make your units. In this case, you're committing the screen and your eyes to select the screen region and then the production buildings. This is really inefficient. These are valuable resources that we don't want to commit when attacking. If we look away from a battle, we can be giving up a gigantic amount of efficiency in our units via micromanaging. Why am I going over this? Because we want to make a new second rotation. I call this the attacking rotation, where we do not need to move the screen or look anywhere else but at the battle and the minimap. This is the rotation we will do when we are in the heat of battle and can't use our eyes or our screen to readjust. Because of the difference in mechanics, let's go over each race and really hash out what the second rotation or the attacking rotation will be. Terran's attacking rotation will look something like this. You make your SCV, you make your units out of the racks, factory, and starport, and that's it. You cannot make mules, depots, or extra buildings. Zerg would look like this. You make drones if necessary. Normally, you wouldn't be making drones because, of course, you're attacking. You're done with that phase. You would make overlords and make units. Notice you cannot inject and you cannot make any buildings during this time as well. Lastly, Protoss would be you make probes. You make units if and only if pylons are close. Remember, we don't want to be moving the screen. You make units out of the Stargate/Robo, and you cannot chrono boost. You cannot make gateway units if there's not a proxy pylon, and you cannot make key buildings. To tangent a little bit, let's go over each attacking rotation. We're trying to hedge the disadvantages as much as possible. Terran's disadvantage is that you cannot make depots and you cannot drop mules. We can hedge this disadvantage by making excess depots and dropping mules before the attack starts. This way, we are able to utilize the attacking rotation optimally, giving ourselves time to commence our attack and not be supply capped, nor lose out on potential minerals. For Zerg, we are not able to inject. To hedge this disadvantage, we will try to line our attacks up with the beginning of our injects. That way we have 50 seconds to fight a battle before we have to go back to injecting again and break away from the action. Lastly, for Protoss, we must be the most deliberate here. We cannot make anything from warp gates without looking away unless a pylon or a warp prism is nearby. To hedge this disadvantage, we would either warp in and then commence our attacks, or make sure we have a warp prism always nearby when we're attacking. Now that we have the attacking rotations, let's talk about executing battles to optimize our efficiency. Battles can be extremely micro-intensive. However, it's important that we macro during this for obvious reasons. This is where we need to utilize two things: experience and the attacking rotation. Experience is needed to play a battle optimally. This is just grinding games and being familiar with the units and compositions. You have to know when you have time to not micro and how it'll change the battle if you microed. If you look at a lot of battles in first-person view afterwards, you'll notice that a lot of times you just stare at the battle looking for something to do. Note that there's nothing wrong with this because you're facing another player who has different ideas and different objectives about that same battle. However, we can now stay on standby watching the battle while we are using the attacking rotation. This is what allows us to macro and micro efficiently. Before we wrap up this episode, I will leave you with one last thing, which is tips to find time to use the attacking rotation. Number 1, retreat. You retreat when you're even or behind. If it's too micro-intensive, like Blink Stalkers against Slow Roach, don't feel bad about retreating for a little bit in order to increase your army by 20%. Sometimes it's just not a bad thing to do. Number 2, when you're harassing with drops, observers and single units rushing out in front are valuable in that they tell you how your opponent is reacting. If your opponent reacts a little slow, it gives you time to fit in a rotation. Number 3, be very confident in your engagements and be willing to allow mistakes. If you feel like you don't need to micro and it will change the battle very little, then just let it go. You'll see after the battle if you were right or not, and you can adjust for future games. This is more speaking to the experience. Alright, so that's going to do it for episode 3, guys. Thank you so very much yet again for all of your support. You guys have been just showering me with a lot of love and feedback, and some of you guys gave me great feedback, and I appreciate that so much. Please follow me and subscribe. Of course, bottom right hand corner is where you can find my email, my Facebook, my Twitter, etc. So please check those out. And last but not least, help me find a name for this, because I'm really looking for a name for these episodes. Maybe if you guessed the right one, I will do a replay analysis on this channel. So keep that in mind. Send them to me via Twitter, email, and I'll catch you next week.